Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to tonight's live stream where, again, I have the pleasure of being joined by journalist Jamie Wilkinson as we look through Chelsea's January transfer window options, really, and all things wing-backs. Now that Lukaku's situation has been put to bed, this is very much now back in the forefront. A lot of Chelsea fans wanting the club to do business, bring in certainly a left wing-back, possibly a right wing-back as well, and for them to get on with it, really. You know, we're 10 days into the window now, Jamie, and it looks like the Digne deal, which seems quite promising right at the beginning of the window, is now kind of dead in the water. Chelsea wanting a loan deal, Everton keen to ship him out permanently, and it looks like Aston Villa are now in pole position to get that deal done between kind of 25 to 30 million pounds. Can you understand why the club, or I don't know whose side, perhaps the club itself or Thomas Tuchel himself also potentially involved in the decision-making, why they've decided against potentially spending £30 million on a 28, 29-year-old fullback in January?
I do understand it. Chelsea historically have made mistakes which have left us lumbered with overpaid players that aren't contributing to the cause. And not to say that any specific player we were to sign this month wouldn't be able to eventually become a key figure. But I think that Chelsea and no top club should be forced into making decisions mid-season purely based off a few injuries, because at that point you're doing it through panic and you're merely looking for stopgaps. You aren't looking to recruit players necessarily which are contributing towards the bigger picture under Thomas Tuchel. So I can certainly see Marina, being the shrewd businesswoman that she is, why she seems reluctant to be dragged into the January scramble.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, as we were touching on before we came on, I mean, we have had some successive January signings, the likes of Gary Cahill and Nicholas Anelka, but other January signings haven't really gone so well. You know, Fernando Torres was a January signing. Emerson himself, which we'll come on to shortly, he was a £30 million January signing as well. And that's not really worked out so far. I mean, moving on to Emerson, I guess from a business perspective, it makes more sense to bring back Emerson than it does to spend £30 million on Digne. But at the same time, you know, I'm seeing fans say, well, this is not really the answer in terms of, I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter as well, like, you know, well, if Emerson wasn't good enough in the summer, why is he suddenly good enough now? I mean, do you subscribe to that thought, or do you just think that actually, if we can get him back, I know it's going to be hard to get him away from Lyon, but do you think that represents the best short-term solution to get us through to the summer, and then we can attempt to address it properly then?
Yeah, I think if we take into account the severity of Ben Chilwell's injury and the fact that no Chelsea fan considers Marcus Alonso a long-term solution on that flank, I think signing a new left wing back who has the potential to even nail down that starting role, I know we love Chilwell, but as a long-term solution is probably on the club's agenda. Now, Emerson wouldn't be that. I think he would know that if he was being recalled, that he would not be brought into the squad to be a long-term solution in that role, because he's been here, he's done it all before, he's played the bit part status. But you know, we're seeing these so-called tier one sources on Twitter and different media outlets saying that Tuchel likes Emerson's character and he likes his attitude. Now, Emerson has never been one to kick up a fuss, no matter how little game time he's been given. So I think if Tuchel likes Emerson as a player and as a person and wants to bring him back, there does seem to be scope for it, with French media reports suggesting that Lyon are only planning on using their option to buy should they finish in the top four. And they have an uphill task on that front. So I think Chelsea would assess their options, and considering we have, someone who's playing left wing back for Lyon and has done for Chelsea, has trained with the squad, has lived in London, has done it all before, has won the European Cup with us. I think you can understand why the club, if we're able to get him back for peanuts, would be entertaining that possibility.
I mean, what do you feel about, you know, people saying, well, if he was surplus to requirements in the summer, why is he suddenly the solution now? Do you feel that, like, this is perhaps, as I touched on, you know, it's just a best of a difficult situation if we can get him back? And do you feel that paying compensation for our own player, if that has to be done, do you feel that's the right thing to do?
I think the key factor here is that we're looking to fill a gap in the squad which wasn't there in the summer. there wasn't a place for Emerson at Chelsea at the time we were open to offers for him. Now there is. I think there'd be scope to sell him in the summer or do another loan or option to buy, obligation to buy, whatever. So I think the situation has changed. What Emerson was to Chelsea before would be different to what Emerson would be if he came back now. And what was your second question? Sorry.
Oh, just about whether, the compensation and stuff, whether that's the
Right,
right.
yeah.
Is it right to pay compensation for it? I know Lyon are kind of within their rights to play hardball over this. Emerson's been one of their better performers this season. If they were to release him from his loan, then they're going to need to bring someone else in as well. I mean, I watched Lyon last night against PSG. Emerson had a decent game. I know Di Maria and Hakimi weren't playing, so that perhaps made it slightly easier for him. But he has been performing to a decent level, and he's been one of Lyon's best players in what's been a difficult season for him so far. But they're going to be reluctant to let him go, so they're probably going to play hardball over this. I mean, how much longer do you feel that the club should look to pursue bringing Emerson back for before kind of switching attention to something else? Because we don't want to let the weeks pass by and we still haven't got him back, and then you're scrambling in the last week of the window to try and do something. I mean, how quickly do we need to find a clear answer from Lyon whether this is possible or not?
Well, this doesn't necessarily answer your question, but I don't think that the club would be focusing their efforts on bringing Emerson back if they didn't have some sort of, encouragement that Lyon would be prepared to do business and Emerson would be prepared to come back. I think for the club to be focusing their attention on negotiations with Lyon and speaking to Emerson and his representatives suggests that they have been given some encouragement on that front. But, January is all about opportunities. The left wing backs that are available now might not be the left wing backs that are available in the second half of the window. So I think, as they would in any transfer window, the club will just be monitoring what comes up on the market. But for the time being, if Emerson looks like the most plausible left wing back that we can add to our squad and he ticks the right boxes, then they're well within their rights to be following that avenue.
I mean, do you look at Emerson as I mean, it's difficult. I know Marcus Alonso's got his critics and rightly so sometimes, but he has performed well for times in a Chelsea shirt. Do you actually think that Emerson coming back is realistically an upgrade on Alonso? Because for me, I don't think there's actually an awful lot of difference between the two players, and it would very much just be an additional option to have rather than the upgrade that a lot of Chelsea fans are looking for in this window.
Yeah, I think the fact that Emerson was quite clearly behind Alonso in the pecking order while he was here suggests that Tuchel prefers Alonso, but that's not to say there's not scope for Emerson to challenge for that spot. There's plenty of games in the second half of this season. That'll be plenty of opportunities for Emerson to play. As a player, is he significantly better than Alonso, if at all? I'm not entirely convinced. But he doesn't need to be because, as much as Chelsea love their hyperbole when it comes to Marcus Alonso, we're not going to fall short of our ambitions this season because he's not as good as Ben Chilwell, other than the Premier League. But in my mind, that's already gone. Emerson just needs to be good enough and he needs to be fit. And I think that's why Chelsea fans should be open to the idea of Emerson coming back, because it's not as if we're spoiled for choice.
Yeah, no, 100%. I do think I've kind of swung round to it a bit now that it does, if it can be done, it does make a lot more sense to bring him back short term rather than spending 25-30 million pounds on someone that's essentially not really going to be a first option.
That's exactly the key point, because we know how long players get lumbered on Chelsea's books. We've made expensive mistakes in the past, and I could list off a few now which to this day are still on our books and loaned out. And I'm just fearsome that if we were to jump into the market through panic and splash out on another player now who's not necessarily at a good age, not necessarily performing at the top of his game, not referring to any player in particular, I think it could prove to be another expensive mistake. And these are the kinds of mistakes that fans like to hold against Marina. So you can criticise her for not dipping into the market, but you would only criticise her again if she did so, signed a player which you were calling for, and then we were stuck with them.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, just kind of playing devil's advocate as such, say Emerson, we can't really get him back. Do you envisage that the club will have other they must have other candidates on a bit of a shortlist. You would expect so. Or do you think that Chelsea might think, actually, do you know what? We can perhaps just muddle through with Alonso and we can just fill in with Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, and maybe the emergence of Lewis Hall at the weekend. Could he perhaps fill in for certain games, possibly? I mean, do you think it really is Emerson or bust, or do you feel that there's perhaps other options that the club will also look into?
Well, certainly the most realistic scenario at this point for me would be to bring Emerson in and nobody else. But in the event that we weren't able to get Emerson, I think it would be important for us to at least add one wing back, regardless of whether they're left or right, naturally. Just because, if of course we can play Pulisic or Hudson-Odoi at wing back, shoehorn them in, but we can't do them at both sides at the same time, and we just need selection options across the board. So I think if we weren't able to get Emerson back, we wouldn't have a choice but to look to sign another wing back in this window.
I mean, I guess like another thing that is probably the club reluctant to bring someone in permanently is the fact that we've got a lot of left backs on the book already. Obviously, Emerson out on loan. We've got Marcus Alonso. We've got Ben Chilwell. We've got Ian Martson out on loan at Coventry, who potentially could be involved at some point next season. You sign, another left wing back in January. That's 5 that are on the books. And it goes back to your point again. We're then suddenly stockpiling players. And can we actually get rid of these players on a permanent deal? Or are we just going to be paying their contracts and they're just going to be going and playing football elsewhere for season upon end? So I guess it comes full circle to the mistakes we've made in the past, players that we still got on the books, the likes of Drinkwater, Batshuayi, Lewis Baker, just to name a few. So I guess there's perhaps a reluctance on that side of things to be kind of diving in. But at the same time, how critical, Jamie, is it for you that we do actually address this in this window? Because it could actually affect us going forward for a very important second half of the season.
Yeah, irrespective of whether you want us to sign someone expensive, a marquee name, I don't think that you can deny the need to address this as a priority. We all saw how early in the season how influential our wing backs are in this system when they're performing to the best of their abilities, as James and Chilwell were in the early stage of the season. We were top of the league. The season is long. We are still competing on all fronts. You might not be able to believe that we can win the Premier League, but we're still in the Champions League, in the FA Cup, in the EFL Cup semis. We're going to the Club World Cup as well. So there, in my mind, the zero possibility that we don't add another wing back to the squad this window, at least one, regardless of whether it's someone that we're bringing back from loan or bringing somebody in. I don't think there's a question mark over whether we can survive to the end of the season without bringing anyone in. For me, the answer is no.
Yeah, no, I'd have to agree with that. He just can't get by. Alonso can't play every game. He's 31 now. We've just got so many games coming up. All those competitions we're involved in still that he reeled off. We need someone else. But I mean, and again, like I see people that are slightly adverse to perhaps a star name or another potential first choice coming in. Oh, but what about Chilwell? But at the end of the day, we've got to be realistic. Chilwell out for the remainder of this season. If we're being realistic, he's probably not going to be playing in a Chelsea shirt again until maybe this time next year, because of the World Cup at the end of November. In December, end of November, December. There's a very realistic chance that Chilwell won't play in a Chelsea shirt until 2023. And in that position, you're thinking, right, well, we actually need to go out and sign another first choice left wing back, whether that's in the summer or not. So I don't think. I guess that some people perhaps haven't taken on board how long it is going to be again until Chilwell plays in a Chelsea shirt.
Yeah, a lot of football to be played, a lot of trophies to miss out on if we narrowly fall short in terms of the options we have available. I'm not comparing them or their performance level to how Chilwell was playing when he did sustain that injury. But when we signed Romelu Lukaku in the summer, I didn't hear many people saying, "Oh, what about Kai Havertz, who scored that goal that won us the Champions League?" Or even, "What about Timo Werner?" And now you're in a position where you're looking at the front three and you're thinking, do either of them start if everyone's fit? They probably don't, not on current form.
Yeah.
I don't think a club like Chelsea can, with the competitions that we're competing for, I don't think we can afford to worry about one player not getting game time when he comes back from injury in potentially a year's time. I think we have to think about the here and now and the trophies that are unavailable in the next 5 months.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's another thing that could be very appealing to Emerson. What, like, if he's still, I mean, reports has believed he's open to coming back, whatever that means. And it's a great opportunity for him to at least add a couple of trophies to his cabinet, which he obviously won't get at Lyon. So that must be of some appeal to him. But again, I don't know what the ins and outs of the deal are. But moving on to the other side, Jamie, again, Nizar Kinsella, the journalist at Goal, well connected to Chelsea, saying that a decision is going to be taken on a right wing back early next week. Obviously, Reece James out for 6 to 8 weeks with that hamstring injury that he picked up. But again, it's probably going to be a little bit longer. I imagine that's 6 to 8 weeks until he's back in training. It's probably going to take him a couple of weeks to get up to scratch to be able to play in a match. So we're looking at probably 2 months plus of him being out. It's probably a little bit less than that now. A right wing back is kind of potentially essential as well. And one name that does keep cropping up is that of Serginho Dest of Barcelona. I'll just bring this up now. Shay Legassi, who is a journalist for Barcelona Times, saying that Chelsea are considering trying to sign him in January, even though the player does not currently want to leave Barca. He wants to be an important player on the team. And he then goes on to reference that Emerson Royale also didn't want to leave, but then a day later, he went for a medical at Spurs. So, you know, Barcelona are one team that everyone knows are looking to sell players to balance the books, to be able to register new players. What are your thoughts on potentially Serginho Dest coming in? I mean, I guess that the age profile will appeal to Chelsea, early 20s, and the fact that he's versatile, can play both sides is also going to be appealing. What are your thoughts on a potential deal to bring him to Stamford Bridge?
Yeah, I think if we're looking at bringing a player in to directly improve the starting 11 tomorrow, I don't think he's the kind of profile we'd be looking at. Started off promising at Barcelona, has since tailed off a little bit, hence probably why they're potentially entertaining offers for him. But I think if we are going to do business in January, it's imperative that we sign players with resale value. And as you said, he's young, can play on either flank, he's versatile. He's American. That marketability is legitimately very appealing to top clubs at this point in time. So we can't brush over that. And yeah, I think if we sign a player this month, we shouldn't be looking at 28 plus. We should be looking at a player where, with Marina's famous loan strategy, even if a move for Dest didn't work out, you know, we could probably recoup any fee we paid for him just in loan fees and an eventual transfer fee. That's, of course, worst case scenario. Fingers crossed he'll be able to come in, develop into an accomplished fullback, and be a potentially, you know, challenge for Reece James's starting spot in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've not watched a lot of Barcelona this season, but he's one of those players that obviously came through at Ajax. Very obviously done well there, got his big move to Barcelona. Hasn't particularly worked out as of yet. He has struggled to kind of get a proper run in the team. He's been all over the place, really. Both sides have been further up the pitch, left wing, right wing, and whatnot. But there is a bit of a player there. But one thing is he does struggle a bit defensively, it must be said. But I'm sure that Tuchel can kind of work on that defensive side of things. But also with the three at the back, you know, as long as he's contributing going forward, like defensively, yes, it is important, but one of those centre-backs can cover him. I'm sure he's not dreadful defensively. And also a deal is reported to be fairly cheap, kind of somewhere between that 20 and 25 million pound mark. And that, again, to the club is going to be a lot more appealing spending it on someone who's 22, 23 with resale value, as you touched on, than it is to be lumping that sort of money on a 28, 29-year-old. So I think early next week we should get some clarity on who's on what potentially is going to happen with that right wing back role. But another one, Jamie, that is obviously, I think it's a bit of an outside shout, but it is an option still available to Chelsea. We've got the young lad Dujon Sterling on loan at Blackpool, I think it is. Is it Blackpool? Yeah, I think it's Blackpool he's on loan at this year. There is a recall option on him, but if we're going to activate that, it's got to be done by Thursday. I mean, I've got to be honest, I don't know an awful lot about him. I'm not really sure if this is the answer. If Ian Martson's not going to be recalled from loan, I think he's a lot more established and a better footballer than Dujon Sterling is, then, I mean, I can't really see any sense in recalling him.
Yeah, interesting, actually. I spoke to Dujon Sterling's agent over the summer, And he was basically telling me how the priority for Dujon, after he had the best part of a year without playing any football, the priority for him was to head out on loan, get minutes under his belt, and then assess his options in the summer of 2022 and going forward. Now, this loan spell has been a mixed bag for him. I think part of that would be because he has spent a year out of the game. I don't know if he's ready to be coming back to Chelsea and joining the first team squad. Now, he was in and around the squad over the pre-season period in the summer. So that gave Tuchel, of course, an opportunity to have a close look at him. But I think the kind of trajectory he's on right now, it wouldn't do him any favours to be brought into the Chelsea squad and be relied on, presumably, to have first team responsibilities. And as much as we have our own needs and desires as a football club and a squad that we want to be competitive, I think it's also important that we consider the requirements of these young players out on loan and what's actually best for them, because we're shipping them off to these clubs so they can develop and progress in their career. And I'm just not sure coming back to Chelsea at this point in time would be the right move for Dujon, as much as I'd love to see him in the Chelsea squad in the future.
Yeah, I think that's probably what's put them off Ian Markson as well, is the fact that it's all these guys are kind of playing sort of for the first time in their careers regular kind of senior football. And it's a massive ask to come from playing kind of regular minutes in the Championship to suddenly step up into a fight for a Premier League title or a fight for a Champions League. The step up in class is so big. It really is. I remember I lucky enough to speak to Eddie Newton a few months back, and he was basically saying that we're talking about the young players coming through and why it seems that some of them struggle. And he just says that people don't realise how different playing youth team football, or whatever they refer to it now these days, is to actually playing in the first team. You can be unbelievable in a youth team, and then you come up and you can really struggle at first team level. So I think it's important that for someone like Dujon, as you touched on, it's probably better for him, as tempting as it would be to come back to Chelsea to try and help them contribute, for trophies. Is that really going to be best for his career development and best for what he wants to do going forward? You probably argue not.
Yeah, I don't think we should really ever be putting young players into a sink or swim situation. When you consider the responsibility that Lampard gave to certain players like Abraham, Mount and Tomori in his first season at Chelsea, they were in a squad with a lot of senior players. They had the pre-season and they came in eventually. Obviously, Mount had Tomori. They had a season to impress Lampard at Derby, but I don't think there was any expectation to immediately come in and make an impact in the squad. In truth, I think they were there to make up the numbers because we couldn't sign any players. Of course, with Cobham being the greatest academy on the planet, they came in and they eventually won us the Champions League. But Dujon at this point in time would be brought into a sink or swim situation where Chelsea are in dire need of a fullback cover either side. And Chelsea are competing in the Premier League, the Club World Cup, the Champions League, the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup. And the fans have expectations to win these trophies. I don't think it would be beneficial to pile that pressure onto any young player, let alone someone that hasn't necessarily been thriving over the last 18 months.
Yeah, no, I think that's 100% fair. I mean, last thing before we just move on to perhaps a couple of other positions that might be addressed in January, probably won't be, but we'll cover them anyway. Lewis Hall had a great debut at the weekend. Standout performer, 17 years of age. It looked like he'd been playing senior football most of his career. We do need to, as Tuchel said, kind of put it into perspective. We were playing against a non-league side. Yes, we should praise the performance because it was really good, but obviously, we need to see how he stacks up against better opposition. I mean, as a bit of a not such left field, but as an outside shout, can you see him potentially being involved in the senior squad a bit more going forward as an option at that left wing back position? Or do you just think that he's probably just going to be playing FA Cup games and probably play against Plymouth in the fourth round potentially as a step up to see how he does? Can you realistically see Lewis Hall being an option for Chelsea at left wing back to try and plug this gap?
I can't, purely because of his age, and I don't. It's kind of the same point with Sterling that I think it's very different being given your opportunity in front of a Stamford Bridge crowd when we're playing a non-league team, and Tuchel knows we're going to win that game comfortably. I think if we were to give Lewis Hall responsibilities and he were to make one mistake, it could be potentially damaging for him. I would absolutely love to see him get more opportunities in cup games where possible, be kept in and around the first team squad, and potentially head out on loan in the summer. But as much as we want to celebrate these positive performances from our young players and get excited about them for the future, we also have to manage our expectations. And I'm not sure it's a particularly good decision to be giving younger players that sort of responsibility at such a young age.
Yeah, I mean, it is a big ask. He's definitely got a bright future. And I agree with you. It would be good to see him stay in and around that first team setup. He looks like a really good player, but again, we just got to manage expectations in that one. Just lastly, before we move on, obviously we touched on Dest, potentially Emerson coming back. Are there any players that you would perhaps like to see come into Chelsea? Like if you could pick sort of someone realistically to come in the January window to perhaps fill that left wing back slot or right hand side, have you got any names that off the top of your head that you'd like to see?
Yes, and I'm sure Chelsea fans would call me a clown for saying it, but see, I have this slight infatuation with Adama Traore because he is just the most entertaining footballer you could ever ask for. For 2/3 of the field, he's one of the best players in the Premier League, and it says it all. That, he fell out of the Wolves starting 11, but he hasn't scored a goal or provided an assist this season. But, recent reports suggest that Tottenham are having a look at him, and the asking price is reduced to 20 million or below. And I'm not saying it's a particularly recommendable move to be signing Adama, sticking him right wing back and hoping for the best. But if you're asking me who I would like to see at Chelsea, there are very few players I would love to watch more on a weekly basis than Adama Traore. I can just imagine him flying up the flank from that right wing back role. I'm sure if you put him on the left, he'd be fine as well. It would be a good watch.
Do you know what? It's not as stupid as it sounds, because I seem to remember that we've been linked with him over the years a lot. We were linked with him when he was at Middlesbrough. Yep. We were linked with him when he was. I think we were linked with him when he was at Barcelona as well, before he came over to England. And I think Tuchel wanted him in the summer. This summer just gone. I know he missed out on Hakimi. Obviously, he chose Paris instead. And I think Tuchel did want Traore, but for some reason that didn't happen. I think it would be a good option because it's one of those that, as you said, he's unpredictable. His output in the final third is not that great. I think he's a player that you could easily train to be a wing back, but he's a physical specimen. And once he gets him ahead of steam, he's a threat going forward. I don't think it's not as ridiculous as people think. And I actually feel that it could be similar to, obviously it's a different manager now, but if he were to come in, I think Tuchel could do something similar with him as what Conte did with Victor Moses. I think there is that potential there. I mean, do you think Traore's on the list, or do you think he's just not at all?
I would be surprised if he wasn't. As you said, he's a long-term club target. Our interest dates back to the Conte years, and as you alluded to, perhaps even further back than that. He was proposed as a potential alternative to Hakimi in the summer. My understanding from reading reports is that his asking price in the summer was considerably more than it is now. I'm not 100% sure whether that's due to a contract situation or whether Wolves just feel like they've taken him as far as they can. But I just think there's something about Adama Traore at 20 million or below that might be worth taking a punt on. I think it's relatively low risk. And the rewards for a player that was considered a future star in his early years at Barcelona, I think the rewards could be potentially higher.
Yeah, and I think it's a lot. I think it would be a better option than seeing Hudson-Odoi or Christian Pulisic in that position. I mean, in an ideal situation, I mean, I think it would be a pretty good window if we. I'm not saying this is going to happen, but if we got Serginho Dest and Adama Traore through the door in this window, would you be happy with that?
To be perfectly honest with you, beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah.
But we've spoken about the profile signings we would like to make this month if we were to make any, and that's players at a good age. Adama's mid-20s. I think it's if we were to sign him for 20 million, there's every possibility we could get our money back for that. Same applies to Dest. So really, if we're talking about these players that are providing cover until the end of the season, and then we'll go from there, I think that they're the right kind of profile of players we should be looking at. And if we were to make 2 signings this month, and they were going to be 2 wing backs, 2 players that we've mentioned as potential targets that we wouldn't mind seeing at the club, then I think you have to say yes. I'd take that as a January transfer window.
I mean, yeah, I think that I'd be pretty happy with that, and I honestly think both those you could get both those players for probably 50 million quid, and considering the market nowadays, I think that's a really good. That would be a good bit of business. But moving away from wing backs, just before we wrap, I just wanted to touch on another couple of positions. I mean, I don't think any other. I mean, before I get into it, do you feel any other positions are going to be addressed this window, Jamie, or is it very much wing backs and then we focus on perhaps a midfield player and someone in the forward line in the summer? Do you feel that January is wing backs very much and nothing else?
Yeah, I think it is. There has been some suggestion that we would consider trying to jump the queue for summer targets and loan them back to their current clubs. But I think in terms of us making additions to the squad this month, it's difficult. We've spoken about the fact it's difficult. I don't think that the club are going to work beyond their means. The wing back is a priority, and I think that's the only thing that we ought to be expecting this window, which is unfortunate because I don't think that we really replaced Giroud, which might sound funny to some because he's not the kind of player you would necessarily worry about replacing when you spend 100 million on a striker. But just that striker that can, we can bring him off the bench, and if we do need to start putting it into the box, or just someone to pop up with a late goal, or carry the burden off Lukaku when we're competing in cup competitions, I would like to see that sort of mid-season Demba Ba type signing. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening.
Just on that, that's a little bit of a tangent. But are you surprised that the club, obviously Lukaku come in, but are you surprised that Tammy and Giroud were allowed to leave with only one striker coming in? Because for me, realistically, we have only got one out and out number 9, because Timo Werner is not a number 9 and Kai Havertz is not a number 9. We actually don't have a backup centre forward, and I think that is a big problem. I mean, when you see Tammy Abraham doing really well at Roma this season, scoring again last night against Juventus, I mean, Tuchel never really took a liking to him, to be honest. I mean, he was very much on the bench more often than not, sometimes not even making matchday scores. He very much didn't seem to fancy him. Are you surprised that another backup striker didn't come in, or that both were allowed to leave?
Yes, I think Tuchel doesn't want to ruffle feathers with the board, and he doesn't want to be too over demanding. I imagine when we sold 2 strikers and signed another, he said, yes, you know what, Havertz and Werner can play through the middle. We're halfway through the season now, and I don't think there's a Chelsea fan out there that really believes that for any considerable run of games that can be the case. Neither of them are natural centre forwards. We seem to have put all of our eggs in the Lukaku basket, and while that's maybe slightly understandable because he is a world-class striker, perhaps we should have been a little bit more street smart and thought about maybe bring another natural striker in just for certain games, certain moments in games. It wouldn't have been such a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I see some people saying, we could have kept the young lad Brozier, who's obviously on loan at Southampton. But again, it's a catch-22, because do you stunt a young player's development? Because we might use you for 15, 20 minutes in the odd league game here, or you might play a League Cup game, or do you go out and let them play week in, week out in the Premier League and establish themselves? And you've got to say that actually, from a player development perspective, it's much better to allow the young lad to go out on loan, play regular Premier League football, and he'll come back to Chelsea a much better player. Whereas, a whole season of bit part of football, he might play 10 games if he's lucky. It's not really good for the development. I'd argue, as much as it would be nice to have an extra option. I think with the young lads, unless they're definitely good enough, they need to go out and get those minutes under the belt.
I agree. And as much as us loaning players out to, let's say, Premier League clubs is for them to get Premier League experience, it's also for them to prove to the club that they're Premier League standard. The club had no evidence to go off prior to the start of the season that Broja could compete in the Premier League and score goals in the Premier League, which is ultimately what a Chelsea striker has to do. Conor Gallagher proved somewhat at West Brom that he can be maybe a lower half of the table Premier League player. This season, he's proven that he's Chelsea quality. Now, I think we ought to celebrate players being out on loan and performing, and not always bemoan the fact that they're not here doing it for us. Broja is scoring goals for Southampton. He's proven his Premier League standard. Brilliant. We can add him to the squad come the summertime. And yeah, that's why you send players out on loan.
100%. I mean, just to wrap up before we finish, mate, it's a bit ironic now, but two players that we sold, one this summer, I think one a couple of summers ago, that we both could have done with now, Livramento and Tarek Lamptey. I mean, that would have been ideal, really. I mean, it's great to see Livramento doing well at Southampton, getting regular minutes. By all means, the club did want to keep him, but he wanted to go and play regular football. I mean, can you see us perhaps exercising the option to buy him back I think it comes in 2023, providing that stint at Southampton goes well? Do you think that's a route the club could go down? Obviously, I don't think Lamptey is going to come back, but when you see him linked to the likes of Tottenham, it's always a little bit disappointing. I mean, overall, how do you feel about those two lads and then leaving the club and those decisions to allow that to happen?
Well, first of all, they inarguably made the right decision to leave Chelsea, didn't they? Because they're playing Premier League football and they're impressing. I think Livramento has a higher ceiling than Lamptey, and the fact that the club have secured a buyback deal for a couple of summers' time or whenever that kicks in is a shrewd bit of business. If he continues on his current trajectory, I can definitely see Chelsea looking to get him back in, regardless of whether we have Reece James or not. Because he is such a talented player. As you said, the club wanted to keep him. The club knew how talented he was. He wanted to go spread his wings and, play Premier League football with Southampton. And he's absolutely justified that decision, the way he's playing this season. And well done to the both of them. I think when they left Chelsea, maybe they would have had one eye on returning one day, proving Chelsea wrong, eventually becoming a Chelsea player. Maybe they'll get that chance, but probably not now.
Yeah, no, yeah, I'd agree with that. Again, hindsight's a great thing, isn't it? We'd kept Livramento and then we could have used him now. Reality is he would have been third choice behind Chilwell and Alonso and probably wouldn't have played any minutes. He might have got a couple of cup games here and there. And I think it's brave as well on his behalf to think I'm at a big club like Chelsea, but actually I want to leave and go and play regular football. I think that shows a lot about his character as well. Absolutely. Just last two names very quickly. Different positions now. I don't think either of these are going to happen in the January window. What are your thoughts on Tchouaméni, the Monaco midfielder? We've been linked with him for a while now. Again, talk of possibly accelerating a deal to get that done in January for him to arrive in the summer. And Ousmane Dembélé as well, the Barcelona forward, as a possibility to come in on a free in the summer if he doesn't sign a new deal at Barcelona. Those deals won't happen in January, but just quickly, what are your thoughts on those two players? And do you think, Tchouaméni, I think, is someone that we've been following. He's kind of the right profile. If we switch to a 4 at the back and go 3 in the midfield, he's kind of that profile of midfield player that would complement what we've got very well already. What are your thoughts on those two players?
Yeah, Tchouaméni is a no-brainer for me. I don't think we have a natural holding midfielder at Chelsea, and he is a lot more than that. With N'Golo Kante, as much as when he plays, he reminds us what an absolute phenom he is, he's not going to be around forever. Not to say that Tchouaméni can replace Kante, but he doesn't necessarily need to. As for Dembélé, it's another one of those ones where it would be low risk if we were able to get him in on a free with potentially high reward, but it could be another Christian Pulisic. And my worry is that if a player signs on a free and they're of the caliber of Ousmane Dembélé, that they're signing with a hefty signing on bonus and on high wages, and there's the possibility that we get stuck with him being paid astronomical amounts on a weekly basis. But I definitely think we need to look at strengthening on the flanks somewhere in there. Whether the club think that's Dembele, whether they think he's worth a risk, that's their decision to make.
Yeah, I mean, on a free, it's always. I mean, a free always sounds so appealing,
It's tempting.
but it is tempting. But then, like, I think people don't realise that generally when you sign someone with a free transfer, yeah, there's no fee, but there's a massive signing on bonus, which is essentially sometimes more than the fee or equal to the fee or whatever. And you've then got, I mean, crucially, if we were to go for Dembele on a free transfer, we'd have to somehow get him to reduce his wages because his wages are astronomical. And for someone, yes, he's played under Thomas Tuchel before at Dortmund, but yes, undoubted ability, always injured.
Yeah,
I just think that's got to come into consideration when looking at bringing in a player like him, is the fact that his injury record is awful. Yes, when he plays, he's good and he's got talent, but he spends most of his time not playing.
That's it. Doesn't matter how good you are if you're not on the football pitch. We've seen that with Pulisic at times, and it would be incredibly frustrating to have two Christian Pulisic's at the club, two players that you know are talented and you know could make a difference, but they're always injured. I think the club would leave a pretty sizable question mark next to that one.
Yeah, and I can't leave without asking the question about Declan Rice. Obviously, that's going to be more summer-based, but having kind of bigged up Tchouaméni as a bit of a no-brainer, I think that's a definite to happen. I'm not necessarily saying Declan Rice this summer, but we're looking at a lot of money, 80, 90 million pounds. He's still got a few years left on his West Ham contract. Chelsea are obviously well-known admirers of him. But you know, you've got a lot of players in that midfield position. You know, we've got Kante, Kovacic, Jorginho, Loftus-Cheek. You've got Gilmour and Gallagher on loan. I mean, Declan Rice comes into... All right, you get Tchouaméni perhaps, but that's 6. Declan Rice comes in, that's 7 in that midfield. You're playing 2 in midfield. I think if Rice were to come in, you'd have to play a 3, but someone would have to be sold in that midfield, you know, and that's blocking potentially Conor Gallagher, or it might be blocking Billy Gilmour. I don't think Gilmour's got a long-term future at Chelsea. That's just my personal opinion. I think Gallagher's probably got a much better chance. But, you know, you're then running that risk of what we've already touched on, of stockpiling players. I mean, where do you stand on the Declan Rice deal? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Declan Rice is a fantastic player, and he's a Chelsea boy, and he's going to be the future of the England national team midfield and the midfield of whatever team are lucky enough to sign him for what could well be north of 100 million at this point. I think if we were to commit to spending the money and bringing in Declan Rice, we have to be aware that there's going to be a high-profile departure from Chelsea in midfield, and it could be N'Golo Kante. I only say that because of his contract. I believe it expires in 2023. Now, if we were to get Declan Rice in this summer, and as you listed off the wealth of talent we have in midfield, are we really going to be looking at handing out any more big money contracts, especially considering Kante's age and his recent injury record? It would be unfortunate for him and it would be unfortunate for us. But I don't think it would just be a Billy Gilmour or a Conor Gallagher who would leave. There'd be certain portions of the Chelsea community that would love it to be Jorginho, but I don't see that happening. I have a suspicion that were we to get Declan Rice, the trade-off could be seeing Kante leave either this summer or at the end of his contract in the next one.
Yeah, no, to be honest, I have seen reports, again, not sure how accurate they are, you know, claiming sources close to Kante think that this season or next season could potentially be his last one in the Chelsea shirt. They feel that he's perhaps got one more big move left in him in his career, whether that's a PSG, whether that's a Real Madrid or whatever it is. I don't think it should be taken for granted that Kante is going to see his years out at Chelsea, because I just don't think that's... That's what's going to happen. And I think, you know, yes, regardless of who comes in, whether it's Tchouaméni, whether it's Rice, I still think there's going to have to be a departure in midfield this summer to make room for the returning loan players potentially, and obviously Tchouaméni as well. But yeah, I mean, there's so much going on at Chelsea at the moment transfer wise. Obviously, the priority in this window, as we just discussed, is getting the the wing back situation sorted. But yeah, obviously that's just myself and Jamie's thoughts on, you know, the January transfer window, looking perhaps a little bit further forward to the summer. Guys, if you've tuned in live, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate your support. If you're watching live and you're not subscribed, please do click that subscribe button. Make sure you smash a like on this video. The subscribers are continuing to go up, so please do that. It really helps me out, helps the channel out, and I appreciate all your support. Also, make sure you follow Jamie on Twitter. Some great stuff on there, so do that. It's along the banner at the bottom, and I've also linked it in the video description, so check his stuff out. Jamie, thank you so much for your time as always. Always a pleasure to chat things Chelsea with you. Guys, we'll catch you in the match preview for the second leg of the Carabao Cup against Spurs tomorrow night. Until then, thanks for tuning in and catch you soon. Cheers.